Hello and welcome back to another episode of How to Be Happy. As always, I am your host, Declan Edwards, someone who is passionately curious about happiness and well-being and what it means to live a happy and fulfilling life. And I am thrilled, honored, grateful, all of the good feelings today. We say all feelings are good feelings here on the show, but particularly feeling quite those pleasurable emotions to share with you that I'm joined for this episode by the one and only Dr. Justin Coulson. Now, Dr. Justin Coulson is known as a parenting expert. You may have seen him at conferences like I did about 7 or 8 years ago, speaking about how to raise happy families. He is the founder of Happy Families, which I highly recommend you check out the website. And you may have even seen him as the parenting expert on Channel 9's Parental Guidance. Justin has a PhD in psychology and is someone that I know for myself I've looked to over many years as a great example of parenting done well. We've just had the conversation. Let me tell you, you are in for a fantastic one. Whether you are a parent, someone wanting to become a parent, whether you're someone who just cares about the impact that you can have on the happiness of children, this is an episode that you absolutely must listen to. We spoke about the parenting paradox, which is the challenges of parenting and why it can feel like parenting is simultaneously great for our happiness and well-being and terrible for it. We spoke about ways to support your happiness as parents, as a couple, and it supports the happiness of your children. We spoke about Justin's practices that him and his family have done for years now to support their own well-being and to facilitate deeper, more meaningful, more impactful conversations. And we even dove into Australia's recent social media ban for under 16s and Justin's upcoming book on boys and what it means to raise healthy, masculine men. There's so much. We could have spoken for absolute hours about this, but the conversation you're about to listen to is one that I hold so dear and I cherish the opportunity to have had. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Justin Coulson to the show. Dr. Justin Coulson, first and foremost, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Thanks for being here on How to Be Happy.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Declan.
Well, speaking of happiness, obviously that's the theme of the whole show, How to Be Happy. I am curious from a professional lens as well as a personal lens. So as a quick little insight here, I first came across you and your work, I'm going to say 7 or 8 years ago now, at the Happiness and Its Causes conference in Sydney. You were talking about, I think it was 21 Days to a Happier Family, I believe at the time.
That's right.
And I was so far from being a parent at that stage. My wife and I had been married for a couple of years. We were early 20s and we're thinking, kids and parenting is something that's going to be further down in our life. And I don't know what was, I ended up kind of wandering into your session and watching and going, this is someone I must remember in the back of my mind for the time when I become a parent. And in 7 months ago, nearly to the day, as of tomorrow, my son will be 7 months old. My wife and I became parents last year. And immediately I went, wait, I know the person that I would love to talk to about this. So there's a personal angle on this as well. I'm curious to get from your perspective, both from a personal lens and a professional lens, what your relationship with happiness is now. So what does happiness mean to you at this stage of your life?
Declan, you're starting really deep. There's a metaphor that springs to mind as you ask the question. It's a story as a young philosophical kitten chasing its tail because it believes that happiness is located there, right? It's like the dog spinning in circles trying to get its tail because it thinks if it catches its tail, mission accomplished, success, achievement, look at what I did. And by catching it, therefore, I'm going to have this perpetual happiness. An older, wiser cat observes this and explains that it too believes that happiness is in its tail. But the wise cat has learned that whenever it chases its tail runs away. But whenever it goes about its business and it lives its life, happiness naturally follows it wherever it goes. And I guess if I was to answer the question, and it's an odd question, so I shouldn't say it's an odd question. It's not a question that I've ever been asked before. And so it's an unusual question to start an interview about a parenting conversation. When we get caught up in chasing happiness, we end up miserable. And the research on this has been demonstrated time and time again for decades. It's in most of the wisdom literature across the world as well. The most obvious one that people would be familiar with, given that we're in a Western educated, industrialized, rich democratic nation, is the New Testament one where it says, if you lose your life, you'll find it. But if you try to find your life, you'll lose it. The idea there being, give your life away Stop worrying about you, worry about the value that you can bring to other people's lives. And as you do that, you're going to live this really purposeful, really wonderful, really happy, really fulfilled life. What's curious about it though, Aristotle, let's go really philosophical for a sec.
Yeah, let's do it.
In Nicomachean, I don't know how to say it. I don't speak the language. But in the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle talks about this thing called eudaimonia. Some people call it finding your daimon. And eudaimonia is this, it's kind of like, I don't know if opposite's quite strong enough, but it's hedonia is I'm going to do what feels good, right? I want to be happy. Chasing the girl, chasing the guy, eating the ice cream, having the drink, going to the incredible destination and having the Instagram photo of a lifetime. That's all hedonia, right? It feels good. I'm avoiding pain. I'm experiencing pleasure. Happy me. But for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? If what goes up has to come down. Aristotle argued that instead of chasing hedonia, which will lead to a crash eventually, like you just can't stay on the top of the mountain forever. No one gets to live on top of the mountain. He argued for this thing called eudaimonia, which is living a life well lived, living a life of virtue, a life of honesty and character, a life of commitment and contribution, a life of service, a life of sacrifice. And when you say all those things, it doesn't sound like fun and it doesn't sound like happiness. Oh my goodness, what have I got to sacrifice? But a really wise mentor of mine once told me that sacrifice means you're giving up something of lesser value for something of greater value. It often doesn't feel like it at the time, but that's what, if we bring it back to parenting, which we haven't started on yet, that's what parenting is. Right. Like I give up my sleep-ins. I give up my nice quiet brunches in my favorite cafe. I give up my right to have an uninterrupted conversation with my wife. And what I do is I sacrifice all of those things for this little munchkin that runs around my knees or my ankles and treads on my toes and interrupts and then turns into a pimply tween or teen who has all sorts of bad attitude and just takes and takes and takes and takes. And yet, what I've discovered is that as I give and give and give and give, and I do so without any expectation of anything in return, my life is rich. My life is meaningful and purposeful to the point where I'm starting to get a little bit weepy and we're only 4 or 5 minutes into this conversation. And when I reflect on, research shows that happiness is not having the children. I think I talked about that in my Happiness and Its Causes talk 7 or 8 years ago. When you have kids, you end up miserable because you are sleep deprived and they do poo their nappies and wee the bed and throw their food on the floor and wake up 5 times a night and all that kind of stuff. And you kind of go, oh my goodness, I am miserable. This is hard. But when you look back on it, I'm a grandpa now, right? Like my eldest has had her first child. I've got a 2-year-old granddaughter who's in the room next to me right now. And I was just talking to my wife about it the other day. We look back now, number one, we cannot believe how fast it's gone. When you're going through it, it doesn't feel fast. But we look back and we experience that thing called eudaimonia. We experience that thing where we say, okay, we've served and we've sacrificed, we've given up, we've been generous, we've done things without any expectation of reciprocity. And it has been returned to us 100 times, 1,000 times what we gave out. It's a really extraordinary paradox of life. And if I can finish with one last little metaphor, I talked about you can't live on top of the mountain. As I said that, it occurred to me that while you can't live on top of the mountain, you can go up there and enjoy the view now and then. Like you are allowed to be happy. But when you come off the mountain and you're in the valley, it's in the valley that the waters run. It's in the valley that you get the shade and the shelter. It's in the valley that you get a lot of the stuff. Even though it's hard, that's where the good stuff is. That's where the good stuff is. That was a long answer. Sorry.
But a very no, nothing to apologize about at all. A very beautiful and meaningful one. And already it's reminded me of a couple of concepts we've discussed before on the show, but I think I needed a reminder of 7 months into parenting. You know, the idea of hedonic happiness came to mind. The hedonic treadmill, when you were talking about the cat chasing its tail, this idea of things will be better if I catch the tail, if I get to the next thing. I cannot tell you how many times in the last 7 months, my wife and I have turned to each other and gone, we just need to get through this phase, like the newborn phase, and then it'll get better after that. And then we just need to get through this part, and then it'll get better. And now he's eating, and if we just get through feeding him real foods, that'll get better. And we found ourselves going, just the other day, we were racing through each stage, hoping that the next one will automatically be better and bring us happiness. And I'm a happiness researcher. I know for a fact that that's not how it works, but it was very human to get caught in that. And you also reminded me of something I dove into late last year when I was probably at our most challenging point of the transition into parenthood. We found about 5-6 months in, we'd mistakenly told ourselves things should feel better by now. And that expectation we'd placed on ourselves was very detrimental to our own well-being. And I came across the literature on the parenting paradox, which I think you already started to allude to there, this idea of, if we ask parents day to day how their well-being and happiness is, a lot of the studies say it's terrible.
Yeah.
Marital happiness goes down, dissatisfaction with life goes up. But then if you ask parents in the long term, has having kids contributed to your life and it made you happier? And we see greater life satisfaction overall, with greater sense of purpose and meaning. And perhaps that's the delineation you're talking about between hedonic or eudaimonic, depending on our approach to happiness there. What are your thoughts on that parenting paradox? And as someone that's only 7 months in, does that change? Give me a glimpse
No.
into my future.
No, I mean, just the other day, again, I was talking to my wife about the kids, and I was like, "Can they just move out already?" Like, and what's so funny, right? I cringe at the term, but I'll use it because it's simple and pragmatic. I'm a parenting expert, so everyone just expects that I'm going to have this happy family, and I know all the answers to all of the parenting problems, and like we sort of skip down the road holding hands and smiling and singing songs together. And like, there are days, honestly, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this. There are days where I just hate being a parent. There are days where I look at my kids and go, this is so hard. I've got 6 kids, right? I've got 6 daughters. I'm currently raising my 5th 15-year-old. I'm going to say that slowly and let it sink in for a sec. Oh my goodness. And it is exhausting. And so, yeah, there are some times where I really do kind of wish it away. I kind of think, it will be really nice when, but I'm just thinking about what you're saying about how you're kind of wishing away those moments as well. And this is one of the great things that grandparents get to enjoy, right? Like, when we have our granddaughter over, we kind of go, my goodness, this is the best. And we just spend time, we watch her, we engage, it's a really beautiful thing. There's a quote from Einstein that I came across recently. I've said this before, but when I say it, it doesn't sound nearly as good. When you say that Einstein said it, people just listen. They're like, oh, Einstein said it, must be true. But it reflects a realization that many, many, many parents have had. And it is this. There's a bit of a sort of preamble to the quote. He said it in 1929. He said, the ordinary human being does not live long enough to draw any substantial benefit from his own experience. And no one, it seems, can benefit by the experiences of others. So I kind of question that preamble. I think that we can learn from our own experience. We can get better, and we can certainly learn from others. But I think what he's saying is the ordinary human, unless they're really intentional, they're probably not learning the lessons that are all around them. But here's the critical line. He says, being both a father and a teacher, I know we can teach our children nothing. Each must learn its lesson anew. And so when you ask that question, my personal reflection right now, given that I've got 4 adult children, plus a 15-year-old and a soon-to-be 12-year-old, is like, I feel like I'm living that on a daily basis. I so badly want to get my kids and sort of just lift them up and put their eyes in front of mine and say, I just want to transfer what I know into your brain, because right now your brain is not working properly. But they don't want me to do that. I can't do that. They've got to kind of figure it out for themselves. And so do you and I. Like, how often do you sit down with your parents as an adult with your own child now and say, hey, mum, dad, you guys have 20 or 30 or maybe even 40 years of accumulated wisdom that I don't yet have. You've been through what I'm going through. You've done X, Y, and Z. And I don't know if I'll do what you suggest, but I'd love to counsel with you. I'd love to bounce some ideas around about a decision I'm trying to make and get your perspective. Most of us as adults, we do not look at our parents as potential sources of wisdom. We look at them as, you're always trying to control me. Why don't you just let me live my life? I can figure this out, which goes back to what Einstein said. And that's one of the great, I think, challenges that we have with parenting is we want the kids at 7 to have the wisdom that we have at 37. And we want our kids at 17 to have the wisdom that we have at 47 or 50 or whatever it is. And it's unfair because think about how stupid you were then. Right?
Risk of challenging Einstein, which I think I'm going to be bold enough to do here. Maybe we could be bold enough to do together. I think you do a little challenge there too. Be like, hopefully we can learn from each other in some way. Because my hope is that people listening to this conversation will get to learn something from your experience. And I know I'm already learning things. Exactly, right? Because otherwise, why are we having this conversation? What have you learned over the years? I'm going to do 2 angles on this. What have you learned over the years that has supported your well-being and your wife's well-being as a parent? And then what have you learned about supporting the well-being of your children? If it's not, as you said, if we can't do it from that direct angle of I'm just going to stuff my knowledge into you and then, force this lesson upon you. We have a lot of people who either they come to the college that I run or they write into the show and they go, hey, I'm loving learning about soft skills and emotional intelligence and boundaries and communication and learn these things for myself. How do I teach this to my child? How do I get them to practice these skills that will hopefully lead to a happier and more flourishing life for themselves? So there's kind of two angles in this. I'd love to hear lessons from your experience about supporting the well-being of us as parents, and then also how do we support the well-being of our children?
So I've made a bunch of notes as you've been talking so that I can
Yeah.
make sure that I'm really thorough here. Let's start off with Kylie and I as parents. So this may come across as, I don't know, dated, or it could come across in any number of ways. Please just take it with the very best of intentions. Generally speaking, there will always be an exception. Okay, so but I'm not going to hedge. I'm just going to say it and move on. Generally speaking, the family can only be as healthy as the two parents who are leading it. So looking after yourself and your spouse or partner is just fundamental to making the family work. I often, when I'm running my parenting workshops, will say, "Hey, tell me about the times when your family's been the happiest." And usually people will say, "Oh, when we're on holidays," right? Like it's the number one answer: when we're on holidays or when it's the weekend. And the question is why? Well, because we don't have as much to do, where the routines are relaxed, all that sort of thing. And so we have a bit of a chat about that. And we have a good old laugh and talk about how life is not a holiday, so therefore we're mostly not happy. But then I will poke and prod a little bit further and I'll get a couple more answers. And invariably, somebody will put up their hand, they'll have that flash of insight and they'll say, the times when our family is the happiest are the times when I'm the happiest. Which to me is like, my goodness, that's right. Like if I'm not happy as a parent, as a mum or as a dad, then no one else is going to be happy. I'm going to walk around with a storm cloud over my head and I'm going to be throwing lightning bolts and thunderclaps in every direction as soon as somebody hasn't made their bed, picked up their bowl, hung their towel up. Instead, there's mold growing on the floor because the towel's been there for 4 days in a sodden mess. And what do you mean you can't find your lunchbox? You had it in your lunch, like it was in your bag. Well, I don't know where my school bag is. Well, how do you not know where your school bag is? You carried it in yesterday. The house is only so big. Can't find my shoes. For goodness sakes, you're doing my head and can't find my school jumper. This is the third one this year. What is going on? So as parents, we kind of live in this state of perpetual stress and anxiety and frustration. And we have these really high expectations of our kids and we're not doing the job really well. So here are the three things that I'm going to say. I could say about 53 of them because I've got a PhD in psychology and I like long lists. But let me pick the three things that I think will make the biggest impact on you as a parent and your well-being. Two of them about you individually and one of them about you as a couple. The first is sleep. There is simply no better parenting hack I know than getting enough sleep. Full stop, end of story. Forget soft skills. Forget looking into your children's eyes and listening and being a gentle parent. Forget all of that stuff. If you do not get enough sleep, I mean, you know this already, Declan, because when you're sleep deprived, even with a 7-month-old, what are you like as a dad?
And to your point, it's hard to do those other things if you're sleep deprived. Like
Exactly.
soft skills, intentional connection, it is so much harder to do that when we're running low on sleep.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just the worst parent ever when I'm tired. We talk about, like my mum used to call it arsenic hour, which is just such a horrible thing to say. But from 5 o'clock till 7 o'clock when the kids are rank and everyone's hungry and we need to get everyone to bed and all that sort of stuff. And she used to call that arsenic hour. And I don't know if it was because she wanted to give it to us or she wanted to take it herself, but maybe it was just from, anyway. And like how depressing, right? But if you get enough sleep, you'll still be tired by that time of day. But if you get enough sleep, you will function so much better. You can solve any heightened challenge when you've got enough sleep. You function differently. So that's the first one. The second one, I'm gonna sound like I'm stepping outside of my wheelhouse here, but my personal experience has been that when we look after our nutrition, we do better. So I've been really, really fascinated looking into just doing a lot of reading and a lot of listening, a lot of watching, and a lot of trying to get my head around what's going on in terms of gut biomes and inflammatory markers and insulin resistance and all the highly processed food environment that we're in. This is outside. Again, I've got a PhD in psychology, so I'm not going to go deep on this because I will make a misstep. My experience has been is I've rid my cupboards and my fridge of processed foods and I've eaten healthy foods like salads and lean meats and whatever else. So again, I'm not a dietitian. I'm not giving dietary advice. What I've found though is that cleaning up your nutrition makes you more vital. It makes you more capable. It clears your head. It helps you to focus better. It just makes you a nicer person. Like there's just no way around it. And the third one, which is my favorite one to talk about, is Kylie and I, a number of years ago. There's a bit of a backstory for this one, but I'll try and make it quick because, as you can tell, I will make this a 4-hour podcast if you let me. A few years ago, probably around about the same time that I was doing happiness as courses and you saw me, I was doing a whole lot of talks for a business organization. They've got groups around the country and they would hire me, bring me into Adelaide or Perth or Sydney or Melbourne or whoever it was. And I'd talk to groups of about 20 business leaders about how they could get their families back on track because so many people are running businesses or doing these high-powered careers. So basically, we give our very best at work, and then we come home and our kids get the leftover, our partner gets the leftover. So I said to these business leaders, how often do you do your numbers? How often do you sit down with your executive team and work out what your goals are? And they said, well, let's break it down. So we've got our annual goals, but then we've got our quarterlies, and then we do our weekly. Let's stay on track. I said, okay, so what's the most important thing in your life? And everyone says, my family. Of course, it's my family. I'm like, okay, when was the last time you sat down with your wife or your husband and said, what are we really working towards this year? And what would it look like if we got together every quarter and tracked our progress? And if we had a weekly update for accountability and to stay on task, like what would that look like? And all these executives looking at me like, what have you been drinking? What are you on? Like, that's not how families work. So anyway, I went home and I said to my wife, I think we should do this. And she said, sure, I'm up for it. So we rented an apartment on the coast and we stayed like an hour away from where we were living. I think we were in Brisbane at the time. And we drove down the coast and stayed at this beautiful apartment looking out of the ocean. And we put together a big agenda. And for 2 nights and however much daytime we could squeeze in, we sat down and went through the agenda. We talked about what we wanted our life to look like. We talked about each of the 6 kids. We talked about their extracurricular activities, their friends, their well-being. We talked about how we were doing. We covered it all off. We talked about the finances. We talked about our goals. And I know some people are probably rolling their eyes and going, wow, sounds like a really stimulating, naughty getaway. But the thing is, we came away and we were like, we're on track. Now we know what we're doing. And then every week, we have this meeting in our home. We call it our weekly couples inventory. I know it's such a sexy name, isn't it? Our weekly couples inventory, our WCI, where we just ask 3 questions based on that big picture thing that we've done. What's going well? What's not? And if there's just one thing we were going to work on this week, what would it be? We get that conversation done in 15 to 20 minutes. Then we sit down with our kids and we do the same thing. And then once every quarter, Kylie and I go away. And it's really annoying. We have a lack of support when it comes to babysitting. There are all kinds of challenges. There is nothing convenient about us doing this. It is so hard that for a couple of years we had to stop it. We just couldn't make it happen. But every time we've done it, and we've just come back from our most recent one to start off the New Year's quarter, we come back and we're energized, we're focused, and we're just better. We're just better. So when you ask that question about, as a parent, what do we do to support our happiness and our well-being, our enlargement, our focus, our effectiveness, we get enough sleep, we really clean up our eating, and we have these quarterly getaways followed by a weekly check-in on those 3 things. And that, for us, has been a game changer. Now, I've shared this with a number of friends over the years, and most of them now do it. Several of them are really high-powered executive. I'm thinking of one in particular who is very, very high up in one of the biggest superannuation companies here in Australia. And he just said, he's been doing it now for about 6 years, 5, 6 years. And he just came back from his most recent one and was chatting with me. And he said, I can't tell you how much this has changed our families, changed our lives. So that would be the answer there. Now, for the kids, in terms of teaching them, I've got a PhD in psychology. I used to be a university lecturer. I'm a professional speaker. Whether my kids like it or not, every Sunday we sit down and we have family conversations about the stuff that I think they need to learn explicitly. We actually teach them explicitly. When I say explicitly, I don't mean as in we use a lot of coarse language. I mean, we explicitly, we sit down and we open our mouths and there's a didactic process. So we're recording this conversation at the start of January on a Monday morning. Yesterday, I sat down with my kids. There were 2 of them missing, but I had the other 4. And we talked about healthy minds. And I played them a whole lot of music that I used to listen to when I was a kid. I started off with Henry Rollins. I don't know if you know Rollins Band, but Henry
I
Rollins,
don't, but I'm going to be listening after this.
I don't know if you will. I don't know. Uh, I cranked up a song called Low
It might
Self.
not be a long listen. It might be a short listen, but I will listen.
Kind of like, he just yells a lot. I'm like, yeah, he was like, I don't know, before Screamo was a thing, he was like, but we were talking about, what does the music do to you? How does it make you feel? And what about the messaging? So the reason I chose that song was because there's a provocation here. There's a contradiction. The music's loud and aggressive and you're getting screamed at, but the message is, I think you've got a low self-opinion, man. I see you standing all by yourself, unable to express the pain that you express. And there's this singer who's talking to this presumably young man, because this is who the music really probably would have appealed to. It certainly did for me, saying, you can learn how to communicate well. We need to turn this low self-opinion around. So the messaging is actually pretty decent, but the music's just raw kind of thing. Went and saw him at the Horton Pavilion in the early 90s. It was one of the best shows of my life. I crowd surfed for the first time at that concert. It was just wild. Anyway, are you allowed to crowd surf anymore? 2026? I don't think they let you do it anymore.
I hope so. I hope it's still part of the live
I don't
music
know.
experience.
I think
I'm going to a concert this week. I'll try it and tell you.
Fingers crossed. Yeah,
Come back
just jump and hope they push you up there. So anyway, the conversation then was about, well, what does this make you feel, and what kind of how does it make you want to behave? And so we played that Colby Calett song about try, put your makeup on, you don't have to try, and talking about the message there. And we talked about just different genres of music and how they make us feel, but also what the messages are. And then I just asked the question, what's the message of the music? What's the message of the media? What's the message of the movie? What's the message of the novel you're reading? What are they putting in your mind? And is it helping you to be better, or is it having a negative impact on your life? So that's explicit teaching every single Sunday. We sit down with the kids for, it's supposed to be 15 minutes, but if we do it right and we've got the right treats and the conversation's good, we can sometimes go for like 40 or 50 or 60 minutes and the kids don't want it to stop. So that's been something that we've done. Now, if I've got a 7-month-old, clearly I'm not going to do that, right? But you can start from about the age of 2 or 3 and you just make it 5 minutes and you just talk to them about basic stuff, really simple things about being a friend or how to smile or how to say hello or being nice to mum, just really, really easy things. As they get older, though, the second thing that I would encourage in terms of your children and their well-being is personal reflection. So if you go back to the Einstein quote, let's assume that people don't like being taught. What I think is really going on here is that there's an autonomy need and people don't like being controlled. So when you as the parent start saying, hey, I've got an idea, I need to tell you, stop doing that, you need to do that instead, the kids just say, hang on, you're interfering with my sense of volition, choice, control, autonomy. Don't like that. I'm going to resist. This is why so many teenagers rebel in their adolescence, right? Because they feel like they've got to push. We as parents give them this thing to push against. But imagine instead of being this rock solid thing, imagine if we just said, that thing that just happened with your sister or that challenge that you're having at school, I've been thinking about it. This is really tough, isn't it? But you don't offer a solution. You just say, wow, this is hard, huh? And they say, yeah. And you say, have you got any ideas about what might work here? And the kids are like, no, because that's what most kids say. Have a think. I've got an idea, but I don't want to share it with you because I know that sometimes when I share ideas with you, you'd rather come up with your own ideas. But I had an idea, and I'd love to see if you can have an idea because maybe you might have the same idea as me. And maybe we could swap ideas once you've had an idea. In other words, what you're doing is you're getting a child to reflect, but you're also teasing because now they know that there's a potential solution to this pain point in their life and you're not giving it to them. And this is absolutely reverse psychology. I don't care if it sounds manipulative or coercive. It's just it's hijacking their neural architecture, right? What you're basically doing is the next day or the day after they come to you and say, hey, what's that idea? And you get to say, well, I don't want to force it on you, so I'd rather hear your ideas first. Like really hold back from sharing your ideas. Be the parent who says, yeah, I have ideas, but your ideas are probably more important. Until they're begging you to tell them. Because once they're saying, yeah, okay, I'll hear your idea, there's no longer any imposition on their volition. There's no longer any sense of control. They're not feeling like you're telling them what to do. Now they're saying, I want to be open to your ideas. And as they're open to your ideas, you start to have a whole lot more influence. So that's kind of a thing that I do with my kids as well. And they would probably be the two most valuable things. Other than that, make sure they get enough sleep, get them off processed foods, have them moving their bodies and spending time with their friends. They're the most important things that you can do.
Well, it sounds like the conversation you had with your family yesterday, what is the message that this is giving you is also intentionality about information diet. As much as you've been intentional about nutrition and what you're doing with physical diet, we're also thinking about what are we feeding our brains? What are we feeding our minds? And being a little bit more intentional about that. And everything you just shared, aligns so closely with things that I'm a huge believer in and supporter of self-determination theory of people, taking their own ownership and choice and not having it forced upon them. Curiosity being an antidote to judgment and to tension, and it's role modeled so beautifully in that. Are you happy to hang around for another 10 minutes? Because I've got a thorny topic I kind of want to talk to you about if we've got the time.
Thorny is fun. Let's do it.
Okay. I'm going to dive into what I've identified recently because I've got a much younger brother. So my younger brother is 15 at the moment. And so
Wow.
I've got this experience of seeing a 15-year-old and now being a father to a 7-month-old son and kind of looking at, okay, and I love my brother. He's an incredible, incredible young man. And I'm hoping I can parent and raise my son to also become a great young man. And that is potentially the thorny topic and the thing I'm very curious about. There's two parts I'm curious about. One is I'm worried about raising a child in an online generation. And I know that in Australia, we've recently made big changes here, and you've been a big supporter and advocate for those changes. I'm curious to get your expansion on the social media ban for under 16s, why you're a big believer in that and supporter of that, and what you hope we see from here, because obviously it's now been rolled out. Like any big social change, it's not going to be perfect straight away. I would kind of want to get your hopes for our children's relationship with the online world, because I think my generation was kind of the test run of that. We sort of transitioned into online world. This is a generation that's now being born into it, essentially. And then my other one is specifically about raising young men and what it means to be a good man these days. I know this is a topic you've been exploring. I'm curious about, a father of 6 daughters. I know your book coming up is about boys and what it means to raise good men and masculinity. So I'd love to get some thoughts on that and maybe some little tidbits that people could look forward to and I can look forward to because I'm on the wait list for your book that I can look forward to learning more about in the book.
You're getting in
So
early.
online world and book about boys and raising good men. Talk to me about those.
All right. So Jonathan Haidt has written a book called The Anxious Generation, and fundamentally is changing the world through that book. I'm not convinced that everything that he's saying is fully evidence-based. I'm still a little bit skeptical around some of the stuff that he's highlighting. Having said that, as a father of 6 with 5 kids who have all been on and lived through the social media explosion of the last decade and a half, he talks about how we've moved from a play-based childhood to a screen-based childhood. And he's advocating that we move back to a play-based childhood and getting screens out of our kids' lives. I think he's right. I do not see any redeeming qualities in big tech being in our children's lives. Full stop, end of story. They hijack our children's dopaminergic system. They absolutely own and dominate our children's neural architecture at a time where they're going through enormous neurological change. And the impact on our children, I mean, you said it right. Let's ignore the recent John Byrne Murdoch publication in the Financial Times, where he highlighted that on pretty much every measure that matters, we're seeing a deterioration in cognitive and emotional capacity, right? So children they don't have the patience, they don't have the self-control. One of the problems that I've got with that, it's based on an American Time Use survey, and he's comparing 16 to 39-year-olds with 2 older generations. 16 to 39 is a massive way.
Huge.
Yeah, I don't like the way they've split the data, and I'm wanting to see more fine-grained analysis. I don't get access to the data. I can only read other people's analysis. So I want to set that aside, but let's just say that it points in a concerning direction. Fundamentally, we thrive when we get the stuff that screens are replacing and displacing. And what we've seen is that the algorithms are really very much designed to attract eyeballs. So when you're driving down the street and there's an accident, or the police are on the side of the road and they're talking to somebody, you can't help but rubberneck, right? Like, you have to look. You've got to check out what's going on. It's human nature. And basically that's what social media is for all of us. That it's just an endless rubbernecking opportunity where there's some violence, or there's something that's a little bit intimate or sexual or provocative, or there's something that's politically outrageous, or there's somebody stealing something or doing something dumb. Our algorithm feed is very different to that that children are seeing, children and young people are seeing. So we shouldn't think that because ours is awesome that theirs is as well. Uh, I just don't think that social media belongs in children's lives. I've actually eradicated it from my own. My team now look after my social media. I don't have access to any of my social media accounts. I've got to have them so that I can have my social media platform, but I haven't checked social media now for a number of months. And I'm just a happier person. I'm just better because I don't have it in my life. And all the stuff that matters, the stuff that I need to know about, I find out about anyway. It's not that hard. So, in terms of the legislation, the government has done the right thing. They had bipartisan support. I don't have any issues at all with what they've done. The implementation has been, I'd give it a C. I wouldn't even give it a C plus. I'd give it a C at best. The implementation has been poor, and a lot of predictable things have happened. Right, kids are using VPNs. They're using photos for ID of their older siblings or even their parents. They're using fake birth dates, and the big tech companies are not working particularly hard to protect kids from themselves.
Why would they? Right?
No,
They're not incentivized to.
completely. Follow the money, follow the incentives. And the other thing is the $49.5 million fine for systemic failure to comply with the legislation. Number one, it hasn't been tested in court yet, and you can bet your boots that it will be. But number two, $49.5 million. I did some calculations recently using AI to find out how long it would take Meta, who owns Facebook and Instagram, how long it would take them to earn that $49.5 million should they be fined. Less than 2 hours.
So it's like, the standard person getting a, what, 20, 30, $40 fine for reckless driving and speeding.
Yeah, like if you're not
Probably
allowed to
not after behavior.
Yeah, if you're gonna park outside your house and get a parking fine for $20 every day, but the alternative is a 2 kilometer walk, you're just gonna pay the $20. That's just the cost of living there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so I think moving forward, we've got to do. I don't know how we do education better, because maybe your generation is the change, Declan, because you guys grew up with it and you saw stuff that you just shouldn't have seen. Right. And I know that when I talk to, so my eldest daughter is 26, she's got her 2-year-old. And when I talk to her and her husband about their approach to their daughter and screens, they're just like, no, we saw too much. We are not going to allow it to be in our daughter's life. So I think that the new generation of parents is hopefully a lot more intentional, a lot more aware and wanting to make a change. Moving forward,
I found it really interesting. So, really quickly on that point, just last week I was talking to my brother who's 15 and asked him, "Have you been kicked off the social media platforms because of the ban?" And he goes, "It didn't work. I'm still on all of them." And I said, "Okay, how do you feel about that?" And he goes, "Honestly, I don't want to be on these. If
right.
none of my friends were on them, I would choose to be off them too." And I said, "Okay, well, why don't you be the lead for that? Like, why don't you just delete them and tell your friends that you're now off them?" And he couldn't do it. He didn't have it in him. And I think that's an unfair expectation to maybe put on, a 15-year-old to go be the change, but I found it interesting that both him and my younger sister, who is 17 now, or turning 17 very soon, both of them said, we don't want this, but we're struggling to let go of it. And that in and of itself was concerning for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the power of big tech. It's the power of the hijacking. It's been so effective.
I saw a great comment under one of your posts the other day, because obviously you've probably dealt with a lot of challenge online. I've been noticing about your stance of supporting the ban. That always brings up, conversation. I saw someone say, "Hey, we're framing this the wrong way. This is less about not allowing our children to access technology and more about not allowing big tech companies to access our children." And
I
as
fell in love
soon
with
as
that
that
quote.
flipped, I went, that's the reframe.
Yeah.
That's the reframe.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not on social media. I didn't see it, but one of my team sent it through to me and I've started
Mm,
using it. It's a brilliant line from a really insightful follower on my platform. And I love
so
that.
good.
Yeah.
So
So
good. Really
the
quickly
short,
before we wrap up, talk to me about Boys, the book that's coming out. Give me some little
right. Yeah.
tidbits.
Yeah. So the
What
short
can we look
version
forward
of
to?
that, the book is called Boys. It'll be out mid-year. Here's the thing. If you have a look at the situation right now, I would argue that the general narrative about boys is negative. There's an expectation that boys are up to no good, that boys are going to hurt each other, that they're going to hurt girls, and that they're going to hurt themselves. And as a result, there's a whole lot of talk about toxic masculinity, which I fundamentally reject. Masculinity is not toxic. There are certain behaviors that we see all too often by a small cohort of men who really do ruin it for everyone. And maybe in some sections of the community, that cohort is actually quite large. But we know better. There are good models all over the place. It just really, what glasses are you going to put on when you're going to look at men? Nevertheless, my biggest challenge writing this book was I'm raising girls, but my daughters are dating boys. And I've got a lot of skin in this game. Plus, everything that I share when parents tell me they're struggling with their boys works, right? Like they're like, oh my goodness, that made such a big difference. And the book is effectively framed around self determination theory, which you mentioned a little bit earlier. All of my work for the last couple of decades has been in self determination theory. I've moved a bit away from positive psychology. I don't feel like the evidence is living up to the promise and the commercialized aspects of pos psych, but self
I think they need to
determination.
expand it a little bit. I know like systems informed positive psychology is one I'm becoming more of a fan of like less individualized, more collective. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's an emerging science. There's more to be done.
so much. But self determination theory has a deep evidence base. And my argument is essentially if we want to raise boys well, they need to be in environments where their relationships they've got good models around them. They've got to have what we would call a relationally need supportive environment. Good people teaching them because masculinity is there are some elements of it that are hardwired, right? So males use their bodies more. They're more sexually interested. They're much more likely to take risks. They're more impulsive. They tend to be more hierarchical and large group focused. Females are the opposite. I would talk about on average, right? So these are hardwired differences. Incredible book called The Ape That Understood the Universe by Steve Stewart Williams that goes into a lot of that evolutionary psychology stuff. And he's got a brand new one coming out called A Billion Years of Sex Differences, which I'm itching to get my hands on. And I've read a number of excerpts from it and just loved it. So there are hardwired differences, but masculinity is also socialized. So we as men have to learn masculinity. But once we've learned it, then we have to earn it. And unfortunately, there is a whole lot of dialogue. There's an enormous narrative out there that's teaching boys to earn their masculinity in less effective ways, in harmful ways for themselves and for the people around them. So fundamentally, if I was to drill down to the one overarching point that I try to make in the book, it's that if we want to raise healthy males, we need to tell them what healthy masculinity is. So my definition of healthy masculinity, which frankly applies across the human race, it's not just a male thing, but boys seem to need this in a way that girls don't. Healthy masculinity is helping the people around you feel safer and stronger. Okay, so you've got strength, you've got the capacity to dominate, you've got the ability to, I don't know, walk into a room and tear it apart if you want to. And some men do, right? And it's terrifying. But what if you were so secure in that strength that you didn't need to demonstrate it? And I make this point all the time from a parenting point of view, and then I realized it applies especially to masculinity. When you're in a situation where you feel like you're losing power, you become a lot more dominant, a lot more assertive. You start showing your power. And every time you have to show your power, what you're demonstrating is that you actually have less of it than you thought. For our young men, raising them so that they can be secure enough in themselves that they don't ever feel like they have to, I don't know, dominate. But instead, they're secure enough that they can lift others up and help them feel safer and stronger. That's what I'm talking about. A quick example. One of my daughters broke up with a boyfriend. They'd only been together for about 2 months. She was heartbroken. I gave her a hug. I said, "You seem really sad." She said, "Yes, I just broke up with my boyfriend." I said, "Why did you leave him? You seemed to be doing okay together." And she said, "Dad," and this was a proud dad moment for me, "he didn't help me to feel safer and stronger." And I was like, the Sunday morning conversations are working, right? And I said, "Tell me more about that. How did you not feel safe and strong?" She said, "We've only been together for 2 months, but every time we're alone, he's putting pressure on me to do things with him that I don't want to do. Not yet. Definitely not. So I don't feel safe with him unless I'm with other people because then the pressure's off." And she said, "But when we're with other people, he consistently makes jokes at my expense. He puts me down. He's denigrating. So I don't feel strong around him either. I don't feel safe or strong." The essence of healthy masculinity is making sure that the people around you feel safe and strong, that you show up in their lives as a bonus. One last quick story. A colleague of mine, she's divorced, early 40s. I was having a chat with her. We have a personal relationship as well as a professional one, so it wasn't inappropriate that I chatted with her about her current status. And I said, are you dating? Are you looking around? Do you want to find another guy?" And she said, I cannot think of how any man could come into my life and be a bonus, which crushed me, right? I'm like, oh, great. So there goes all men. But what she basically said was, when I get onto Hinge or any other dating app, I just get all these guys who are looking for a mother. I just get all these guys who are looking for somebody that they can jump in the sack with. And she said, That's not what I want. I want a life partner. I want somebody that I can, somebody who shows up and isn't relying on me to cook and clean and do everything. Somebody who actually wants to share in my life and be part of my life and contribute to my life." And she said, "I'm just not finding them. Maybe I'm looking in all the wrong places, but I just don't know if they're out there." And I had a little bit of a laugh. I'm like, put that on your Tinder profile. Show me your bonus. I thought that would be very funny. You didn't laugh as loudly as I thought you would laugh. I thought that, I imagine this. Never mind. Imagine the messages. You never show me. Yeah, all right. Okay. So showing up with value, showing up with bonus. I tell my daughters, look for the chair stackers. Like when the activity's over, go for the guys who have seen the need and without being asked have gone and packed away the chairs or swept the floors or done the dishes. That's the guy that you want in your life, right? Because he's not trying to impress anyone. He's not doing it because he has to. He's doing it because he's the kind of person who shows up and adds value. He's the kind of person who helps the people around him feel safer and stronger. That's the guy.
We could continue having this conversation for hours, and part of me wants to, but I'm mindful of your time. In reflection of this conversation and recognition of your time and you being so kind to give your insight, your experience, your knowledge, and your time to come on the show and share these stories and these insights with not only me, but with the audience. Something that I'm a huge believer of is this podcast needs to serve to be a force for good in the world. And I think that happens in a few ways. One, I learn a lot from people who come on this show, and I can already there's been parts in this conversation that have felt very healing to me. Specifically, hearing you say that there are parts where you're like, there are days when I don't like being a parent. I know I've felt that. And it felt very healing to go, hey, this is someone I look up to as an example of a very good parent and who's seen, as you said in the media, as like a parenting expert who says, I feel that way too. So thank you for sharing. Like that was very healing for me.
Hard to say that
And I know
publicly.
there'll be people listening to this. Yeah, there'll be people who hear this who it'll be healing for them too. And there's been parts that have challenged me, parts that have expanded my thinking. So I know I've benefited from this, but as a force for impact, the people who listen to this will benefit. And we also want to make it a force for impact. And we do make it. Every subscriber of the show, we actually pay to have a square meter of rainforest protected. And in recognition of you being in here, we actually wanted you to choose a United Nations Sustainable Development Goal that matters to you, that we can then fund a charitable initiative towards it. So I don't know how familiar you are with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. If you do a quick little Google, have a quick little look up of them, there's things like no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education. I'd love for you to choose one that matters to you, and we'll make a contribution to it.
That's wonderful. I'll look forward to doing that. I'll have a squeeze rather than just shooting from the hip. But that sounds
Of
great.
course, yeah. I'll send through an email with it, and just if you let me know which one, we'll go from there. But
Declan,
officially and
helping
formally,
people
thank
feel
you
safer
so
and
much for being here.
Oh, sorry, I
Yeah.
talked over you. Sorry. Declan,
No, you're good.
helping people feel safer and stronger. That's that generosity. That's what I'm talking about. I love it. I love it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of How to Be Happy. I hope that you found my conversation with Dr. Justin Coulson as insightful, meaningful, and impactful as I did. I know that's one that I'll be revisiting and listening to again. And by the way, Dr. Justin emailed me shortly after we finished recording and said that he would love for his episode to support the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 4, which is quality education. So we have funded 200 days of education access for children in developing countries, thanks to Dr. Justin appearing on the show. Remember, you can also make a difference out there and make the world a better place just by tapping subscribe on this show. We actually protect a square meter of rainforest on your behalf. And we've recently, as of today, when I was making that 200-day education donation, we also paid to donate another 1,000 square meters. And that's thanks to our subscribers, thanks to our followers. So if you haven't already tapped subscribe, please do so. If you have friends and family who haven't subscribed that you think would benefit from listening to the show, tell them about it. It's the best way that we can spread the happiness ripple effect is the more people who listen to this, the more and more people who learn the skills and science of happiness, obviously the better the world becomes. And the more rainforest we get to protect. Now, we have some incredible episodes coming up this season, so make sure you stay tuned. And as always, If this episode has resonated with you, please don't just leave it here. Don't stop the conversation here. Please continue your learning, your growth, and development. If you want to learn more from our amazing guest today, Dr. Justin Coulson, I highly recommend that you check out his website, happyfamilies.com.au. There's just full of resources on that website for all things to do with parenting and raising resilient, happy, flourishing kids. So, highly recommend checking that out, especially if you are a parent. You can also listen to his podcast, the Happy Families podcast, and make sure you put your name down for the waitlist for his upcoming book, especially if you're the parent of a young boy or a young man. I know my name is on that waitlist. So all the links for those recommendations are in the show notes. And if you'd like to learn more about the skills and science of happiness at BU Happiness College, then you'll find those links there as well. But until next time, thank you once again for joining me here. Thank you for playing your part in making the world a little bit happier. I'll see you in the next episode of How to Be Happy.